doing. This is not the Prophet Sallallahu is not an individual who speaks just on his own accord. Yes, he was a wise man, he could speak on his own accord, but then he had additional wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide him in what he said. So when he heard that people, so he made an announcement, he made a khutbah, he says that I have heard that you people are criticizing Imratu Usama, you are criticizing and questioning the leadership of Usama, and you've done that before about his father as well. And you know what? He is la khaliqun bil imra. He is definitely worthy of this position of leading leading this army. So it wasn't just by chance that he made him, he did it premeditatingly. It was a premeditated decision that he gave on Usama. So then he fought for it, he argued for that case. Now the thing to think about here is that look at the level of trust he had in this 18-year-old. Now, it's not that this 18-year-old had proved himself and he'd already made a place in the minds of people and in the hearts of people, so everybody was fine with it. They weren't. They criticized it, which proves that there's something about this issue. And the Prophet ﷺ then argued his case and explained that no, he is definitely has the right to do this and has the capacity to do this. Then the Prophet ﷺ, as this force and army is ready outside, the Prophet ﷺ passes away. Inna lillahi wa he departs from this world, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu becomes the next Khalif. He does not do anything differently. If the Prophet ﷺ had enough trust in this 18-year-old, let it be the case, and thus he led that army and there were victories. But what I'm trying to say is that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alayhi Wasallam, the same Prophet who did not want the Kaaba to be rebuilt in the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The Kaaba had just been recently demolished and rebuilt, renovated by the Quraysh because it had become quite dilapidated and worn out and everything. So they collected their money together and made it. But because they had shortage of funds, instead of making it rectangular the way it was originally in time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, they made it square as it is right now. The way the Kaaba is right now, that's how the Prophet ﷺ had it rebuilt. With the door that's how the Quraysh built it. And what they did was they made the door higher up so that not everybody can go in as they please. You have to bring steps to, it was just their way of saying not everybody can go in, only those who we want to go in. But the Prophet ﷺ always had this desire that I want to rebuild it. I would have liked to rebuild it in that rectangular way, door at the bottom, in fact 2 doors, like the Hatim, that semicircular portion, to be part of the Kaaba. But then he kept saying that the only reason I don't do this is because the people have just become Muslim and they have just built this with so much effort and sweat. It may make them feel bad that we've just put all this effort in now. You know, it's gone down the drain. We have to do it again. Just sensitivity to people's feelings. But when it came to this issue, he wanted to give the youth a position. He wanted to give them that confidence. So he fought for that confidence. And subhanAllah, it was fine. Many 100 years after that, as prophesied, as foretold by Rasulullah Sallallahu Alayhi Wasallam, the same thing happened in Istanbul. Muhammad bin Fatih of the Uthmanis, he was the first one after the Sahaba, and many others tried to overcome Istanbul. Nobody was able to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given victory to Muhammad bin Fatih. And what he did was, if you look at Istanbul today, Istanbul, there's the Asian side, and then there's the European side, and there's this Bosphorus river that's going through, and then there's a little other water called the Golden Horn. So it was very well by the Christians, by the Christians, the Roman Empire, that they're the ones who held it for many years, and it could never be overcome. And they had, the reason why you couldn't overcome it is because it had the water on 2 sides, and then on the other side it had land, and they were able to, they had some chains here which did not allow anybody to come in through ships. So Muhammad bin Fatih is 17 or 18 years old. What he does that in one night, he has these boards that he has greased with fat, and there's about a 9-mile stretch of land. over that land in one night. He had the ships dragged and pulled and pushed over that piece of land into the Bosphorus, Golden Horn. Next morning when they wake up, the ships are all there. And that's it, the city was overtaken. That's an 18-year-old, Allah gave him that tawfiq. So the Prophet ﷺ was this ajib murabbi. These were the youth around Rasulullah ﷺ. Now you could say, of course, their teacher was Rasulullah ﷺ. So yes, 16, 17-year-olds, they can get that ability. But what you have to understand, I'm not trying to tell off the older community. The youth, they don't act mature enough sometimes. We know that. That's the thing. In fact, there's a difference. We have a hypocritical situation in this country. The law for marriage is what? How old you have to be married? 16 with permission and 18 on your own. 16 with permission, 18 on your own. And at what age do they want to teach sex education from? From 5. What does that mean? To be married, you have to be 16 or 18, but to learn about sexual education, you have to be 5. Because the reason they want to teach it is because people are active from that age. Hypocritical situation. They don't want to allow the license thing to happen. It's illegal to be married before the age of 16. That's why there's people who change the dates in their passports if they come young and to do that. But they want to make sure that they are safe when they do it haram in a haram manner. We live in weird ways. The other thing is you are legally responsible in this country after kind of 18. Before that, it's a kind of a gray area. 16 is gray area. But in Islam, you're mature from the time that you become mature at the age of 12, 13 or 14. Responsible, you become responsible. But because people don't treat you responsibly, they still treat you like a kid, people don't mature enough. I have seen the difference. When I was an imam in America, out of all of the kids in this one area that I used to go to teach, there was this one family, their kids seemed to be more mature. I said, how come? Because they just knew how to deal with the teacher, for example. They were very helpful. They weren't just playing all the time. So apparently this family had just come from Pakistan recently. So they were new, they were not born there. And it's the same thing in England as well. People in these countries, because they have more responsibility, because life is a bit more tough in these places, they become mature. They feel responsible much at a more younger age. So feeling responsible, feeling mature, feeling up to responsibility is generally a communal effect and an influence. But we have to make them that. We have to give them that ability and help them. The older generation has a big responsibility towards our younger generation. And our younger generation needs to stand up to the act to see that, look, I need to do something for myself. There is a very famous Islamic philosopher whose name was Ibn Sina, Avicenna they call him. He was from Balkh and Bukhara, in that area. You know what he said? He said by the age of 18, he went into this great library of the Samanids. The Ahlu Saman were the rulers of Uzbekistan and that whole area, Transoxiana you call that. They were the rulers of that area, and they loved the ulama, they loved books, and they had one of the best libraries. The Royal Samanid Library in Bukhara was an amazing library. Muslims have always had great encouragement towards books, and then we had a very bad period in between where there was a big downfall. So now what happens is he went into that library and he says that I saw books in there that I had only heard about before and never seen, and there were now also books in there that I'd never even heard about. Now, for his statement to be of value, for somebody to say, I saw books in there that I'd never heard about, well, what's the big deal? You haven't heard about many books. What's so valuable about what you're saying? Well, clearly he had value in what he's saying, because he says himself that by the age of 18, I had studied all of those books that were to be of substance and of benefit to me in later life. After 18, I didn't read anything substantial. By 18, I'd read all the main books. And today, subhanAllah, we just about start at that age if we're lucky. Our knowledge, the Sahaba had a different situation. So we can't apply that same thing, but we can learn from their zeal. So let's take another example. So Usama radiallahu an, for me that was just amazing how much trust did Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have in an 18-year-old, that he said, no, he is the leader. Can you imagine us making an 18-year-old the chairman of the masjid? I'm not saying we have to do this. I mean, do we have 18-year-olds who are capable? That's the question. So it's not we're not to blame the older people. We have to blame, it's our communal issue that we're blaming all of ourselves. So, not just that. One is that somebody puts you in a position and you're 18-year-olds and you feel that you can do it. That's another aspect of it. For Usama to feel that I can lead the likes of Umar and Uthman and Ali radiallahu an, subhanallah. That, for him to feel capable of doing that, that's another amazing thing. These are the kind of people we're talking about, the youth of the Sahaba. Now, among all of these youth of the Sahaba, we have many, subhanAllah, we have many that were youth at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I know we've spoken about men so far, but there was one who shines out more than anybody else. In fact, her entire youth was spent while the Prophet ﷺ was alive. And she was no more than 18 years old when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And yet she is one of the most prolific narrator of hadith. And so much of our deen is from her. And it's none other than Aisha radiallahu anha. She starts at the age of 9 being in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as his wife. He passes away when she's about 18 years old. Only 18. And today we don't even consider 19-year-olds to be capable of marriage. So we have to tell them a moratorium on them that for 2 years you can't do anything because you don't have their ability. Subhanallah, from the age of 9 to 18, that's when she learned, soaked up everything of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amazing young woman, amazing young woman. Subhanallah, you just are amazed at what her level of maturity. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to her, I know when you're angry with me. How do you know that? Because he said that when you're angry with me, you say, Wa Rabbu Ibrahim. You swear by the Lord of Ibrahim, this, that, or the other. So she wasn't expressing her anger, red in the face and getting angry. She would just change her words. Wa Rabbu Ibrahim. And when you're okay with me, when you're not angry with me, you say, Wa Rabbu Muhammad, by the Lord of Muhammad. Now, he noticed this, the Prophet ﷺ, so he mentioned it to her. That's good enough. But now look at her intellect. Look at her love. Look at her understanding. Immediately she says, because she has to respond to this. So she says, oh, I only drop your name from my tongue. It's in my heart. Now only an intellectual person who really understands love and understanding and adab can say this. Because she's got the adab of Rasulullah ﷺ to keep. Then she's got the adab of him as a husband to keep. And then of course there's her love that she has to fulfill. So now he's noticed that there is a difference. But subhanallah, and then look at another story of hers. I don't want to talk about the whole story. It's a very saddening story. We don't have the time. We would spend the whole time talking about that story if we did. It's the story of when she was slandered and she was accused falsely of zina, of fornication. She got left behind basically. She was very light. She was a very young woman, very light. And in those days, they were carried in a howdah. A howdah is like a palanquin, which like this kind of enclosure that they would carry and put on a camel. So they would sit inside there and they would travel. So she was so light, her palanquin, her howdah was down. She'd gone to relieve herself, or she'd gone to look for a necklace. There's difference of opinion there. She'd gone somewhere. There was an announcement made that, okay, let's go. So the people who used to take her howdah off and on, they thought she was inside. They didn't realize that she's not in there. She was so light anyway. So they put it on and they left. Now, generally, in this kind of a setup, they would have at least one person who would stay back after everybody left to make sure there was nothing that had dropped or nobody been left behind. That was, what was his name? Safwan ibn Mu'attal. Safwan ibn Mu'attal radiyallahu anhu. So when Safwan came by, he saw her and she'd fallen asleep. She came back and she discovered that they're all gone. It's probably what, 13, 14, 15 years old, around that age. Proper teenager, right, in that age. So she thought, okay, they'll come back, they'll discover I'm not there, the Prophet ﷺ will find out and they'll come back for me. And she didn't go frantic, she fell asleep. And she didn't have a face covering on. She said, nobody's there. So when he came, he said, I recognized her from before the hukm, before the command of the hijab had come down. So I'd seen her before then, so I recognized her. I said, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Anyway, then he put her on his animal and they took. Now the munafiqeen, the hypocrites were always ready to make a big fuss out of nothing. So they said, look, they've committed zina. Now the thing was that lots of people started to say this. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea what's going on. But she did feel a difference from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He wasn't the same. He wasn't the same. And she doesn't know otherwise. So one day she's going with this older woman that used to help her out. One day they're going in the morning, they had to go outside at a distance to relieve themselves because there were none of these indoor closet toilets in those days. So this was Mistah's mother that was going with her, an older woman that used to look after her. So she tripped and she said, Ta'isa Mistah. May Mistah be destroyed. So Aisha radhiyallahu anha said, how can you say that about your son? Such a good person, how can you say that about him? So she turns on and she says, don't you know what he's saying about you? There was a few of the non-munafiqeen that for some reason got involved in this affair and also started to carry this rumor around. He was one of them. And his family was sponsored by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, her father. They used to spend on them. Right? So she said, no, I didn't know that. And then she said, that's it. The ground just gave way and I became ill. Now everything is fitting together of what's happening and why the Prophet ﷺ is like that. Now the Prophet ﷺ is making inquiries because this has become like a big rumor, so he needs to make sure that nothing has happened. He knows inside nothing has happened, but he needs to just make sure. So he goes and asks Ali radiallahu anhu, he goes and asks some of the other wives. And you see, this is where their fairness comes into play. They had massive rivalry. They would plot against each other. They would do many strange things trying to spoil the relationship and things like that. But when the Prophet ﷺ came and asked one of the other wives about Aisha radiallahu anha, said, no, I have no doubt that she is safe. She is secure. She is innocent. So when it came to Iman, they were very clear about that. So as I said, I didn't want to get into this story, but just to an overview, finally what happened is, she decided that, let me go to my father's house. So she left home, she went to her father's house. Then one day the Prophet ﷺ came, and a long discussion and everything. And Aisha radiallahu anha, the Prophet ﷺ then suddenly, revelation started coming to him. And subhanAllah, like nearly 2 pages of our current Mus'haf and Quran that we have, good 10, 12, 13 verses came down, freeing her from this rumor. And when this happened, this was a very emotional time because the Prophet ﷺ is there. He's come to Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu's house. Her mother's there and she is there. And now this revelation has come and the Prophet ﷺ explains it and he's now happy because from Allah it's come. Now there's no question about anything. Nobody can say anything. Inside he had trust, but there's people and you have to manage people. That's very important. Now look at this situation. She should just be happy that it's all finished and go and hug her husband and get back to him. As the verses came down, her mother said to her, thank Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She says, I'm not going to thank anybody but Allah. He is the one who... So she's got her own independent thought. She's the only one who's allowed to do this with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because she's a wife. Nobody else can have this kind of pretense with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this kind of boldness. I mean, no other believer can do that. It's kufr, for somebody to challenge Rasulullah. Only his wives were allowed to do strange things like that because that's a wife's relationship and that was kept in its own place. So you can tell the kind of mind that she had, what kind of an individual she was. And that is why, because she was such a rallying factor, a unifying force, that when Uthman radiallahu anhu was martyred, of course she was much older then, so we're talking another 20 years down the line, 22 years down the line after that. So now she's about 40, 38, 40 years old. And Uthman radiallahu anhu is martyred. Ali radiallahu anhu becomes the Khalif. And he knows that the wisest thing to do right now is to calm the situation first. Get control of the situation. It was in disarray, chaos. Who killed Uthman radiallahu anhu became very confusing. Why they killed him, what's the story, where they've gone, where they've hidden, who was involved, who wasn't involved. This became very, very chaotic. Aisha radiallahu anha had gone to Makkah Mukarramah for pilgrimage. On her way back, she was told that, now the story, what it became is that Ali radiallahu anhu became the next Khalif. He wanted to obviously go after the murderers of Uthman radiallahu anhu, but there's no way he could have done that while there's chaos, because there's no control. You need to get control first, then find what's going on. Otherwise, you're causing more chaos. So he was correct in his approach. But the others just felt that maybe he was delaying. They just felt that he was delaying taking action. So he was right from the position of the Amir. He was right that he couldn't do that right now. But for them, Uthman, the Khalif, has been killed, the first ever Khalif who's been martyred in cold blood like that. Umar was stabbed, but that was by an individual. There was no major chaos like that. And then the person was caught straight away and dealt with. Whereas in this case, there's nobody that's been incriminated. So they go to Aisha radiallahu anha that, look, people will listen to you, so you lead us. So then she obviously went with this on a camel, and it became known as the incident of the camel, the Jamal. But then she regretted it later. Some very interesting things took place. She came to a place, and that will just prolong the story, and that's not our part of the story. But she is one of the youth at the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam who then became the mother of the believers. And out of all of, now she was the youngest of the wives. Sauda radiallahu anha was the oldest of the wives. But this youth in the time of Rasulullah, the one who's been probably, you could say, out of all of the youth in Medina Munawwara, she was probably the one who was closest to Rasulullah. Because she wasn't just benefiting from him by day, but they would speak at night. Their intimacy, their closeness, this was, can you imagine what kind of barakat that she received? Subhanallah, the way I look at it, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, why he's so great? The ulama says, كَانَ شَيْءٌ فِي قَلْبِ. It was something in his heart. He was no youth. He was older. He was 2 years and some months younger than Rasulullah Sallallahu Alayhi Wasallam. So he was older. But do you know when they were in the cave, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam chose him as his partner of migration to migrate from Makkah Mukarramah to Medina Munawwara. So they went and stayed in the cave for 3 days. Now that time of closeness, can you imagine what kind of outpouring faith that he benefited from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in that state of insecurity? So Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu really benefited from. And in our tradition, in Islam, we believe in benefiting from the suhbah of someone. We believe in company. Very important. This is what gave the youth around the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam the benefit. They were in this company. That's what made them different. To be 18 and to, subhanAllah, do what they had to do. For Aisha to become the teacher of the ummah, like that. To hold her in respect, like that. So, we believe in that. And subhanAllah, research shows that people affect each other. Have you noticed that sometimes you sit in a room and people just suddenly become attracted to one individual and he takes the dominating role, right? A lot of the time it's people who speak the loudest, but not all the time. Sometimes it's not the one, it's just... We are told in salat to make sure that our rows are straight and that everybody is in a straight line. In fact, once the Prophet ﷺ, his remark was that straighten your lines, because if you don't straighten your lines, Allah will create discord in your hearts. Now you think about that. What is the correlation between discord in the hearts and having crooked lines? In fact, once the Prophet ﷺ saw that there was one person who was slightly out of the line. So that's when he mentioned this. Recently, in the last 30 years, there's this new science that they've been pursuing, which is called neuropsychocardiology, which is an old tradition in Islam, but we just didn't call it neuropsychocardiology. Otherwise, Imam Ghazali and everybody, they've been doing this, which is the effect of the heart beyond it being a biological pump of blood throughout the body. Because until now, all the studies of the cardiac studies have been all about the way the heart functions, its health, and how it pumps the blood around the body, and its health and how it does that. But recently what they've discovered is that the heart contains the similar cells that are in the brain. And we've been saying it's the heart which governs the body, though the mind is the place where the information is stored. And we know about this. The heart is so important for us. It's not just a vessel to pump blood, but it's more than that. So recently they've been doing this and they found this. The other thing they found is that hearts, when people are sitting together, they get in sync with one another. The strongest heart, it actually syncs all the others towards it. This is a natural phenomenon in this world. For example, they did a study which they took, have you seen these grandfather clocks you get? These big clocks with the pendulums? I mean, I don't know if anybody still has one in their house, but these pendulums. So they took quite a number of them, 15, 20 of them, different sizes. And they had all of their pendulums swinging at different times. But after some time when they went in, they had all become in sync with the biggest one. The biggest one, it just synchronized all of them to it. So there's this natural thing. So now when the lines are straight, as Prophet ﷺ said, he just didn't say it scientifically. He just said it as a hukm. If the lines are not straight, you're going to have discord. Then you wonder why people aren't speaking to each other. So something is seemingly insignificant like that we don't observe. And our masajid, right, the first line is generally fine, but all the rest of the lines, they're first class lines. What do I mean by first class? Everybody needs extra space around them. Sometimes I go into the masjid, you go late, and there is so many gaps in between, in the third and fourth line. People aren't standing properly together. They're arams, they're just standing, And that's totally wrong. You should be standing together. No, you need some breathing space. You should be standing shoulder to shoulder. Okay, we don't insist on the feet being together. But now you can understand why sometimes that may be a wise thing to keep your feet together, as some people insist. Though it's not the sunnah to do that, right? But it's just to keep people together. So keep your shoulders together. But these small details that we have from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they have a bigger impact than we know. And these things will be revealed over and over again afterwards. But we do it for the sake that it's the sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we move on to Ali radiallahu anh. Ali radiallahu anh is very young. He is the first person to become a believer in Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam after he received his first revelation was Khadija radiallahu anha, the wife of Rasulullah. She is the first one to accept. Then there's a difference of opinion as to whether some say that it was Ali the second, or Abu Bakr, or Zayd radiallahu anh. The way you reconcile that is that from the youth, from the young children and teenagers, it was Ali radiallahu anh was the first. And that is really something. For a young man, to say, I want to go against my entire community, to take the faith as the first person, what does it mean? It means I'm going against my entire community and that's what I'm going to do. One is you look at it, okay, I have become a Muslim. But what was the circumstance of the time? Why is he becoming a Muslim? It's like what we have today. There's a family who have no ulama, nobody who's practicing. Suddenly there's one child from that, an 8 or 9-year-old, not a 16-year-old. But an 8 or 9-year-old decides, you know what, I want to go and study, I want to become pious, I want to become a wali of Allah, I'm going. Can you see how phenomenal that will be? Well, this is even more phenomenal than that, because there's nobody in that community who's a Muslim. Whole of Makkah are pagans. And a young kid of 8 or 9 years old, 10 years old, he's becoming a believer. Just because one man said so. Look at that achievement. That's a child in the time. That's Ali radiallahu anhu. He had that determination, subhanAllah. He had that determination. And subhanAllah, his life is ajib. I would say, just from my perspective, his most wondrous years were until Uthman radiallahu anhu was martyred. He shone throughout those years. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to elevate his status even further, and he gave him another 4 or 5 miserable years. What do I mean by that? So during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he's this young man, youth, maybe he's now 12, 13, 14, 15. He goes and takes the big, as I say, pehelwan. There's no word like that in English. Pehelwan. You know what I mean. The big bouncers. He took him on and finished him off. Then during the battle of Khaybar, the Prophet ﷺ said, tomorrow somebody's going to come. And Ali radiallahu anhu wasn't present at the time. He had a problem with his eye, so he was going to come later. Tomorrow there's going to be somebody who Allah loves and he loves Allah. I'm going to give him the flag and a victory is going to be given to him. And everybody's waiting. Umar radiallahu anhu said, I was even hoping for that day. Ali radiallahu anhu comes along. He had a problem in his eye. The Prophet ﷺ put something on his saliva on there. It became better. And that's it. He went and he got that victory. During Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu's time, during Umar radiallahu anhu's time, he's outshining Uthman radiallahu anhu's time so much that he does. Unfortunately, it comes to his time of Khilafah and there's massive problems. Starting with this whole problem with Aisha radiallahu anha. And it was eventually resolved. Then with Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, that unfortunately never became resolved. It could have become resolved. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was in Sham, in Damascus, with a very firm base. Ali radiallahu anhu was in Medina Munawwara, unfortunately with a lot of chaos at that time because the rebels had created a big problem. But then he had his army and they were going to march towards Sham. They did they did on a few occasions. Then eventually, the story is long, but they decided that okay, we will have arbitration. A group of people thought that Ali and Muawiyah, Amr ibn al-As, all these Sahaba had become kafir. Why? Because وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. That's what he said. They thought that for the two parties agreeing to send arbitrators to decide was incorrect. Haram. Against the Quran. So they're kafir. These were the Khawarij. And today you have people around the world who go around giving fatwas of kufr and others, and not only giving fatwas but going and killing people, other Muslims, because they don't subscribe to the same ideology. One is, you understand that there's an extreme ideology, but they think that anybody who doesn't subscribe to their particular ideology is extreme to the level that they're kafir. So they kill him. So how can you join ISIS? How can you join ISIS? You might be killed the next day because you've got some idea that they don't like and you become, permissible to kill. Right? Let's keep the questions. There is a question time. We'll deal with it inshallah then. Right? So the ideology, this is a generic ideology that is, you'll have it in your, we ourselves may be extreme in some sense. It's a human natural failing. Some people are extreme and some people are lax. So you'll have some people who are just extreme, where you have individuals in your own family. You may be one of them, where you've broken up with everybody, including your brother, your father, and your children, because you think they're wrong in something, so you stop talking to them. That's a possibility. I'm sure everybody knows somebody like that. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La khayra fi man la ya'lif wa la yu'laf. Al-mu'minu ma'lafun wa la khayra fi man la ya'lif wa la yu'laf." A believer is a place of affection. And there's no good in the one who is neither treated with affection or who does not treat others with affection. Right? So the thing is that there has to be a balance in our approach. People are going to do wrong. So then you have in our communities, you'll have people, so this is a human failing. The Khawarij just became a group that did that. But you'll have individuals, and if there's enough of them and they give themselves a name, then they just become a group. This is just quite a normal kind of human thing that we have to try to avoid extremes. Extremes are a problem in every sense of it. So now, Ali radiallahu anhu saying, what happened is, you've got these individuals who are charging him with kufr now. So he has to take care of them because they're a bigger problem than the problem with Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. So he goes and first he sends Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, another youth, to go and explain to them because he was the scholar of the Quran. He managed to convince quite a few of them who left, but the others, they stayed. And they fought. Most of them were killed. Few were left. They went somewhere else, rallied a lot of other people, and they popped up again. The way I describe them is they were irritants in the side of Ali radiallahu anhu. They just kept popping up, and his armies would have to go after them. Finally, when he managed to quash that rebellion, then he told his army, now let's go and deal with the Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's army and deal with that situation, finalize it. They said, we're too weary now, we're too tired. We're totally now tired from this and we can't do it anymore. Then what happens is that the few lasting Khawarij, they sent 3 assassins. They said, you know what, let's just get rid of Ali radiallahu anhu, Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, and Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu. Let's just finish them all off. They're all kafir. So they sent 3 assassins. Now they were all 3 in different cities. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was in Sham, Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu, I forget where he was, and Ali radiallahu anhu was in Medina Munawwara. The one who went for Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu, they was from Allah. Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu was sick that day. He was at home at Fajr time. He didn't go for Fajr. Somebody else was leading the prayer. This assassin was a bit bewakoof. He didn't know who was Amr ibn As, who was not. He killed the Imam, thinking it was Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu. So Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu was safe. Then Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was, mashallah, a very big individual, very well endowed. And the Prophet ﷺ even made some remarks about him. So he was stabbed, but it wasn't fatal. The person was caught and taken care of. Unfortunately, Ali had made dua before that because the situation had become really rough for him. He made dua. That's why I said that the worst of his years from an outsider perspective were the last years of his khilafah, because he had no relaxation during that time. Constant. But that was all an elevation of status for him. He finally made dua to Allah, and he was martyred in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That assassin was successful in killing him. Right? So that's Ali radiallahu anhu. So there's a number of other stories we don't have the time. But for example, Amr ibn Salama radiallahu anhu, he was of those tribes who held out from becoming believers until the conquest of Mecca. You see, what happened is they had seen how the Prophet ﷺ was a lot of victories. They'd seen a lot of good things, but they weren't fully convinced to become Muslim. They knew that whoever takes Mecca, then they're going to have to be on the right track. So let's wait until what happens in Mecca. Whoever wins that, then we know that they are on the truth, because that is Allah's city and Allah will preserve it. So when the conquest of Mecca took place, you had numerous tribes that just came into Islam, one after the other. So Amr ibn Salama, he says, he was 6 or 7 years old, he said, my tribe became a Muslim then. But from before that, when he's 4, 5, 6, 7, he says, we used to live on the trade route by this water area. So everybody, caravans would stop by. And they would come from Medina Munawwara and they would say things to us, this is what he's been taught. So they would read parts of the Quran and I would just remember everything. So he had memorized a huge amount of the Quran just like that before even becoming a Muslim. Then his father, after the conquest of Mecca, they became Muslim, the tribe became Muslim. And his father came back and said, the one who's going to lead you in salat has to be the one who knows the most Quran. Who knows the most Quran of that community? A 6 or 7-year-old. So they put him forward to lead the imamat. Subhanallah. Now, just from a fatwa basis, that was in the beginning of Islam. Today, for a person to lead the prayer, he needs to be baligh, he needs to be mature, right? Which is probably 11 years, 12 years old, whenever they become mature, generally speaking, right? There is a weak opinion about nafil prayers being allowed from somebody who, from a child who's mature enough to understand rights and wrong. But a fard prayer, that's a different opinion though. But the stronger opinion is that no, they shouldn't even do Taraweeh prayer. They should be mature for that. But subhanAllah, one is that he feels capable of leading them, and the other one is that the people are reading salat behind a 7-year-old. So this is the kind of opportunity that you can see was brought about by the nurturing and by proper achievement. But he was an avid learner of the Quran. Then, for example, you had Samura ibn Jundub and Rafi ibn Khadij radiallahu anh. Battle of Uhud. The Prophet ﷺ wants everybody to go, but not the young children. He sees a lot of the young children. He says, no, you guys have to go back home. You're too young for this. So Rafi ibn Khadij, Samura ibn Jundub, they're trying to hide. But they get caught out that, okay, no, you have to go home. You're too young. You can't go. So finally, Rafi ibn Khadij, he argues his case that I am a very expert bowsman. I fire very well. So he said, okay, fine, you can go. Now, Samura ibn Jundub, he sees his friend going. He's like, man, what's wrong? I can't go. So he says, you know what? If I wrestle with him, I'll put him down. I'll put him down. So the Prophet said, okay, go on, let me see. So he did put him down. He says, okay, you can go as well. So this proves that they did have wrestling and, they had this kind of thing that was going on. We understand these things from that. Now, I just want to clarify one thing. Whenever we speak about the Sahaba, generally when people speak about the Sahaba, they always bring these issues about fighting, right? Now, tell me something. All of these years that I've been growing up and we've been listening to Hikayatul Sahaba, Fadail A'mar, and all these great stories of the valor of the Sahaba, did you ever feel like going and killing some non-Muslims? Is that what it created in your mind? Or did you just take it as like this ghairah of iman and this strength and this valor and strong on your faith? We never misunderstood that. Do you understand? Because there is this call that all of these stories from the Sahaba must be, censored because they create violence. Where's the violence been before 10 years since the aggression that's been going around the world because of our aggression to people around the world? So it comes back on us, meaning this country. I never at young age felt like, I had to go and kill somebody to become like a Sahabi. That was never the narrative I got from that. And I don't know if that's what you guys got, right? It's only when you think about it in that frame, then it becomes like that. Otherwise, it's just a story of valor, right? I just want to clarify that because this is something that's going on that, we should ban these books because they talk about. So there's a story in Bukhari, which is, how many minutes have we had, Mom? Okay, so we have a story of Mu'adh ibn Amr ibn al-Jamuh and Mu'adh ibn Afra. This is related by Imam Bukhari, beautiful story. Abdur-Rahman ibn Auf, radiallahu an, he is, during the Battle of Badr, he is in the ranks. They've been formed. So when you're in the ranks, he looks around and he says, let me look around as to who's next to me. You want strong people to be next to you in a battle so that they can come to your aid. So I look around to the right and there's this 12-year-old kid. Oh no. Then I look around, another 12-year-old kid. I say, oh no. Right? Now, what kind of a situation am I in? Then suddenly, his mind is put to rest because the one on the right suddenly says, Ay ammi, oh my uncle. He says, what? He says, who's Abu Jahl? He says, why? What have you got to do with Abu Jahl? He says, I've heard أنه يسب رسول الله Sallallahu, Alayhi, Wasallam. I've heard that he curses Rasulullah Sallallahu, Alayhi, Wasallam. And today, if I see him, I'm going to attack him and then my body will not leave him until one of us dies. I thought, wow, right? Suddenly, as I'm just reading from this, recovering from that, the other one turns to me, he says, Ay ammi, who's Abu Jahl? So, same thing. They'd both come for that reason. Suddenly, after a while, I saw him strutting around and I said, that's your man. And immediately they both jumped at him, ran to him like, it says, like a saqr, like eagles, like wild birds. And they attacked him. Now remember, Abu Jahl was a leader. He only became Abu Jahl afterwards. He was Abu al-Hakam before, the father of judicial insight. Very intelligent individual, a leader of the Quraysh. Very arrogant individual. They attacked him. One attacked his horse, one attacked him, and they put him down, and then Abdullah ibn Mas'ud came and finished him off. Then they both come to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I killed him, I killed him, I killed him. So now they're both arguing about it. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, hold on, have you wiped your swords? They said, no, look. They both had blood. He says, okay, both of you killed him. Right? So we've got a lot of things, because that was the demand of the situation at that time. So we have those, Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. After he learned the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ told him, look, we have some ulama, have some people who know the Torah, the Old Testament. He says, within 5 days I'd mastered the Torah. He knew Hebrew and he mastered the Torah. So the Prophet ﷺ had this encouragement to facilitate for all of these different things. And we as a community need that as well. To facilitate for all of our needs. We need to have experts in the different fields. It wasn't just about the battle. They're just the most kind of, you can say, the most exotic stories that we hear about. They're the easy stories. But to look for the other great stories of the great intellectual pursuits of these individuals and the great achievements that they did at a young age. So Zayd ibn Thabit was once a couple came to the Prophet Sallallahu, Alayhi, Wasallam, and they had committed zina. And they said, we want you, Ya Rasulullah, to give us a penalty. He says, what does it say in your book? So they covered one part of the book and they started reading, and they said that, oh, you have to put them, blacken their face in front of people and parade them backwards on an animal, just humiliate them. Zayd radiallahu anhu said, no, move your hand. And then when he read, it was that they had to be stoned to death. So you had these young people that were experts of that nature. So today, we live in a very strange world. Unfortunately, we don't become mature enough until we're too old. So the most important thing as parents is for us to mature our children, to help them, to give them responsibility. And of course, that's a long story, that's a long subject of how to give them responsibility, not to just mollycoddle them, as they say, not just to basically spoon feed them until last. Give them responsibility, give them the ability to think for themselves, but within a right paradigm, within the correct paradigm, so that they become your supporters and they become your strength. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz becomes the Khalif. He's been awake all night dealing with the funeral of Sulaiman ibn Abdul Aziz, the Khalif before him, Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik. The next day after that, he gives a short khutbah and then says, I'm going to take a rest. I'll see you at Dhuhr time and I'll deal with everybody's issues. Everybody has gathered now. So he goes and he takes off to go and have a little rest so that he could be fresh to give to deal with everybody's problems. And as he's going, his son comes and he says, where are you going? Oh, father, I'm going to have a little rest. I've had all night been awake with the burial proceedings. He says, what happens if you're to pass away? All those people who are sitting there waiting for you to sort their situations out, their cases out, what response are you going to give to them? This is a son talking to his father. That's the kind of children we need. So he hugged this child. He says, all praise is to Allah who gave me such support from my own children. So then he went, and immediately there's a Christian person who has a case that the previous ruler had, one of the previous, not the ruler, somebody in the ruling party had taken his lands and so on and so forth. Immediately Umar ibn Abdul Aziz radiallahu anhu rahimahullah gave orders that okay, be re-given to him, and the justice prevail and so on and so forth. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was about 40 or younger when he died. And he made it such that the whole of North Africa, there was nobody there to accept zakat. Everybody was well off. So you have these youth. And what is youth, by the way? According to Ibn al-Jawzi, youth is all the way from when you become mature, 12, 13 years old, until you're 33 years old. That's youth, not until you're 20. Right? So that is youth. And subhanAllah, it's one of those volatile times. It's those times where if you don't spend on WhatsApp all day and YouTube and just talking to each other on Facebook, then you'll make something out of your life. Otherwise, you'll become a Facebook expert. If that makes you any money, if that gets you any closer to Allah, that's fine. But if it doesn't, which it doesn't, then you've wasted a lot of time. These are the fitna that we need to avoid. We're not saying Facebook is haram. It's there to stay. You use it in the correct manner. But if you're obsessed and addicted by these things, and today we're in a situation where, subhanallah, the Sahaba used to come and, the wives of the Sahaba used to come and complain about their husbands that they don't come to them at night and they keep praying and they fast during the day. That was the complaint of the Sahaba, the wives of the Sahaba to Rasulullah. I had a dignified individual from my community come and complain to me, a man, complaining to me about his wife that she spends all day on WhatsApp. I said, what has the world come to? The wives were complaining that their husbands were spending too much time praying, namaz, and they wouldn't come to them. And now we have men complaining that their wives are on WhatsApp. And WhatsApp is such a big fitna that you can be cooking and still doing WhatsApp and miss out on some masala. Oh, really sorry, I'm really sorry. Well, you were on WhatsApp. Oh, I was looking at the recipes. My friends, they were discussing a recipe. Subhanallah. Sometimes one couple, they are trying to go to sleep and one's on WhatsApp, the other one's trying to go to sleep or waiting for the other one to make some advance, but they're on WhatsApp, talking to friends. We live in a different time and situation. These are the fitnas of our time and we need to deal with them. We look at the Sahaba, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq. Short time to be able to do justice to any Sahaba. These are just certain glimpses of some of the young Sahaba and their achievements. May Allah give us the tawfiq. May Allah allow our children to be of that nature, because that's very important. That is very important. To be successful both in this world and in the hereafter. Recently in London, we've got a child that I know, 16 years old, just finished his GCSE. He gets 9 A stars and 2 A's. The parents, they get congratulations from everywhere. But little do anybody else know that he's also a hafiz of the Quran. Why didn't they congratulate him for that? In fact, my belief is that that's why he got the 9 A stars. And for 3 years he's been doing alim course while he's doing the GCSEs. So this is while doing alim class, coming home 9 o'clock at night after the alim class, going at 8 o'clock in the morning to school, coming from madrasa at 9 o'clock, still getting A stars. We have that capability in our community. We have many phenomenal young men and women in our community. We just, unfortunately, we lose them to futile things because we don't have the right setup. We have to really think about this. May Allah give us the tawfiq wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. We'll do a quick dua and then inshallah we'll take some questions if there's time before, otherwise afterwards inshallah. Maghrib time. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث اللهم يا حنان يا منان لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين جزا الله عنا محمدا ما هو أهله. Oh Allah, treat us with your mercy despite our wrongs and despite our weaknesses, despite all of our excesses. Oh Allah, we have focus on the fact that you have mentioned that you will be merciful and for us not to ever be despondent in your mercy. Oh Allah, we have seen in this world that when a mother becomes angry with her child, she will say to the father, your son or your daughter did this, and she would not even say my son did this anymore. But oh Allah, you say in the Quran, oh my servants who have excessed against themselves, do not become despondent in my mercy, for I forgive all sins. Oh Allah, you've retained 99% of mercy, and you've only had 1% of that mercy distributed in the world, which every mother uses for their children. Oh Allah, we ask that you treat us with your mercy, and you assist us and you help us, and you protect us and our children and our progeny until the day of judgment from all the evils out there. And you help and assist our Muslim brothers and sisters around the world, wherever they are, from all the aggression that they are facing. And you give us the understanding of the truth as the truth and allow us to follow it, and the wrong as the wrong, and you allow us to abstain from it. Oh Allah, and we ask you one final thing, that you send your abundant blessings on our Messenger Muhammad Sallallahu, Alayhi, Wasallam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifoon wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillah.